$14.5 million. 12 weeks of work. Playing the same character he'd played a dozen times before. Matthew McConaughey read the script, listened to his agent pitch the deal, and said the two words that would either save his career or destroy it. "I'm done." This is the moment Hollywood's favorite shirtless rom-com star walked away from a fortune to bet everything on a vision nobody else believed in. The moment one of the most bankable actors in America chose unemployment over easy money. The moment that separated Matthew McConaughey, the punchline, from Matthew McConaughey, the artist. But what happens when you fire yourself at the peak of your fame? When you're making millions playing a character everyone loves, but that character is slowly killing who you really are? When the world sees you as a golden retriever in a tuxedo and you know you're capable of so much more? Matthew didn't just risk his career, he risked his family's future. 20 months. That's how long he went without a single acting job. 20 months of silence while his girlfriend got pregnant, while his savings shrank, while Hollywood forgot his name. 20 months of wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Behind the laid-back Texas drawl and the all right catchphrase lies something most people never knew existed. A man willing to lose everything he'd built to become someone he'd never been. A transformation so complete, so unexpected, that critics gave it its own name. A comeback that required him to literally starve himself, losing nearly 50 pounds, turning his body into something unrecognizable. How does the guy everyone's laughing at become the guy everyone's studying? How do you turn being typecast into a masterclass in reinvention? How do you know when to walk away from millions? And what actually happened during those 20 months in the wilderness when nobody was watching? But before we understand how Matthew reinvented himself, we need to understand where he came from. Because his story doesn't start in Hollywood. It starts in a small Texas town where football mattered more than movies, where a father's death during intimacy with his wife became a family legend, and where a kid who broke his nose 13 times learned that survival means showing up or getting left behind. This is how Matthew McConaughey went from Hollywood's punchline to one of its most respected artists. All right, let's go. Block 01. Backstory, Texas roots and false starts. Matthew David McConaughey was born on November 4, 1969, in Uvalde, Texas, a small town where football mattered more than movies, and nobody dreamed of Hollywood. His father, James Donald McConaughey, ran an oil pipe supply business and owned a gas station. Tough, loud, larger than life. His mother, Mary Kathleen K. McCabe, taught kindergarten with the same iron will she brought to raising 3 wild boys. The McConaughey household wasn't quiet or polite. It was full-throttled Texas living. Jim and Kay divorced twice and remarried each other 3 times. Their love was volcanic, explosive, passionate. They fought hard and loved harder. Matthew would later describe it as a tough love household where you better show up or get left behind. Growing up as the youngest of 3 brothers, Matthew learned early that survival meant toughness. He broke his nose so many times, 13 in total, that it became a badge of honor rather than a medical concern. Backyard football, schoolyard fights, just Tuesday in Texas. His older brother Pat was quiet and steady. His middle brother Rooster was a wild card, the kind of guy who'd later become a reality TV star and run an oil pipe business just like their dad. Jim McConaughey wasn't a man who said, "I love you," softly. He said it through discipline, through expectations, through teaching his sons that life doesn't give participation trophies. He believed in hard work, personal responsibility, and the kind of rugged individualism that defines Texas. But he also believed in living fully, embracing every moment with intensity. That intensity defined their family right up until the morning it ended. In 1992, when Matthew was 23 years old and studying film at the University of Texas at Austin, he got the call that shattered his understanding of mortality. His father had died suddenly at age 63, but it wasn't a heart attack during work or a car accident. Jim McConaughey died while making love to his wife, Kay. In the middle of intimacy, his heart gave out. For most families, this would be a private tragedy whispered about in hushed tones. But Kay McConaughey told it differently. She told Matthew and his brothers that their father had died exactly as he wanted, living fully, loving completely, right up to his last heartbeat. He came and went at the same time, she said, with the kind of matter-of-fact honesty that defines how the McConaughey's talk about life. Years later, Matthew would reflect on this with his signature philosophical bent. "My dad died making love to my mother. That's pretty cool. He came and went at the same time. I want to go out the same way." What could have been trauma became a kind of legend. A story about a man who lived so fully he couldn't separate joy from death. But losing Jim at 23 left a crater. Matthew had just started figuring out who he was, what he wanted. And suddenly, the man who defined masculinity, toughness, and Texas pride was gone. The lessons remained, but the teacher had disappeared. Before that loss, Matthew's path seemed straightforward and completely disconnected from Hollywood. At the University of Texas, he was a solid student majoring in film, but he was planning to go to law school. His plan was simple: become a lawyer, make his family proud, live a respectable Texas life. Movies were interesting, but they were also a fantasy reserved for people from Los Angeles and New York. Then came a moment of clarity disguised as a panic attack. While studying for the LSAT, Matthew had what he describes as a revelation. He was sitting in his apartment, law books spread around him, and suddenly he couldn't breathe. Not because of medical reasons, but because his body was rejecting the future he was building. He realized he was preparing for someone else's dream, not his own. He called his mother. "I don't want to be a lawyer." Kay, always direct, asked the only question that mattered. "Then what do you want to be?" "I think I want to act." There was a pause. Then Kay said something that would define the rest of his life. "Don't half-ass it. If you're going to do it, then do it. But don't come crying to me when it doesn't work out." That was the McConaughey version of permission. Not soft encouragement, but a challenge. Prove it. Show up. Earn it. Matthew stayed in Austin, started taking acting classes, and began showing up at every audition, every casting call, every opportunity. He was tall, good-looking, charismatic, but so were 1,000 other guys in Texas trying to break into the business. What set Matthew apart was a quality harder to define: presence. Then came the night that changed everything. In 1993, Matthew was at a hotel bar in Austin when he met casting director and producer Don Phillips, who was in town working on a Richard Linklater film called Dazed and Confused. They started talking. Phillips saw something raw and magnetic in this Texas kid with the laid-back drawl and confident energy. He asked Matthew if he wanted to audition. The role was small. David Wooderson, a guy in his 20s, still hanging around high school kids, driving a 1970s car, chasing girls too young for him. It could have been creepy. In Matthew's hands, it became iconic. He showed up to the audition with one goal: don't act like you're trying to get the part. Be the part. He leaned into everything Texas and effortless about himself. The slow drawl, the easygoing confidence, the sense that Wooderson didn't worry about tomorrow because today was already pretty good. And then he improvised a line that would follow him for the next 3 decades. All right, all right, all right. It wasn't in the script. It wasn't planned. Matthew said later he was channeling Jim Morrison's live album where Morrison repeated, "all right," before a song. It just felt right, loose, cool, effortlessly Wooderson. Richard Linklater kept it. The movie came out in 1993, and while it wasn't a massive box office hit, it became a cult classic. And Matthew McConaughey's 30 seconds of screen time became the most quoted part of the film. Hollywood noticed. The rom-coms were coming. The shirtless scenes were coming. Millions of dollars were coming. And with them, a golden cage that would take him 15 years to escape. Rom-com era and the trap. After Dazed and Confused, Matthew's career took off exactly the way every young actor dreams. Fast, lucrative, visible. In 1996, he landed the lead role in A Time to Kill, a legal thriller based on John Grisham's best-selling novel. Playing young lawyer Jake Brigance opposite Samuel L. Jackson, Sandra Bullock, and Kevin Spacey, Matthew proved he could carry a major studio film. The movie grossed $152 million worldwide. Critics noticed his intensity, his charisma, his ability to hold the screen against veterans. For a moment, it looked like Matthew McConaughey might become the next great dramatic actor of his generation. But Hollywood had a different plan. Executives looked at Matthew and saw something more immediately profitable. A charming, good-looking guy who could anchor romantic comedies. The kind of movies that don't win Oscars but print money. The kind of roles that require a good smile, a willingness to take your shirt off, and just enough acting to keep the plot moving. The offers poured in, and the money was impossible to ignore. The Wedding Planner, opposite Jennifer Lopez in 2001, grossed $95 million. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, with Kate Hudson in 2003, made $177 million. Failure to Launch in 2006 pulled in $130 million. Matthew was playing the same character over and over. The charming guy with commitment issues who eventually realizes love is worth it. Shirtless scene in Act 2. Emotional speech in Act 3. Kiss in the Rain. Roll credits. He was making $5 million per movie. Then $8 million. The paychecks kept climbing and the scripts kept getting thinner. But the trap was comfortable. Matthew bought a house in Malibu. He drove vintage cars. He surfed. He played bongos naked, which became a punchline after a noise complaint arrest in 1999. He dated beautiful women. He lived the exact life movies promised Hollywood could give you, except he was dying inside. Matthew started noticing something painful. At parties, at industry events, even at auditions for serious roles, people didn't take him seriously. Directors would smile politely when his agent submitted him for dramatic parts, then cast someone else. Critics reviewed his rom-coms with a shrug. McConaughey does his usual charming thing. Even fans loved him, but they loved him the way you love a golden retriever. Pleasant, non-threatening, incapable of depth. He tried to break out. In 2005, he starred in Sahara, an action-adventure film that was supposed to be his Indiana Jones moment. He did his own stunts. He trained for months. The movie had a $160 million budget and all the pieces for a franchise. It bombed spectacularly. Critics destroyed it. Audiences stayed away. The film lost over $100 million and became one of the biggest flops of the decade. Instead of proving Matthew could do action and drama, it confirmed what Hollywood already believed. He was a rom-com guy who couldn't carry anything else. The failure stung. But the real wound was deeper. Matthew realized Hollywood had put him in a box, and every time he tried to climb out, the walls got higher. He was trapped by his own success. The rom-coms kept coming because they made money, and he kept taking them because turning down $8 million felt impossible. But something was breaking inside him. He'd watch actors his age, guys like Christian Bale and Jake Gyllenhaal, doing the kind of work he dreamed of. Complex characters, challenging scripts, films that mattered. Meanwhile, he was being fitted for another tuxedo to stand next to another beautiful actress while they pretended to fall in love. In interviews from that era, you can see the strain. He'd talk about looking for the right dramatic role while promoting another rom-com. He'd mention wanting to work with serious directors, then show up shirtless in another trailer. The disconnect between who he wanted to be and who Hollywood paid him to be was becoming unbearable. His agent would call with offers, another romantic comedy, $10 million this time. And Matthew would feel his stomach turn. The money was seductive, but it was also a prison sentence. Every yes to easy money was a no to the career he actually wanted. By 2008, Matthew McConaughey was one of the most famous actors in the world and one of the least respected. He was a punchline on late-night TV, a guy other actors joked about, someone audiences liked but nobody admired. He'd achieved Hollywood success and lost his artistic soul in the process. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Matthew was at home, 38 years old, sitting on his porch in Malibu. His agent called with an offer for another rom-com. The check was massive, $14.5 million for 12 weeks of work, playing the same character he'd played 15 times before. Easy money. Safe money. The kind of offer you don't turn down. Matthew asked his agent to read him the script. As he listened, something inside him snapped. Not with anger, but with clarity. He realized that if he said yes to this, he would be saying yes to this forever. Hollywood would never see him differently, because he would never be different. He told his agent no. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, Matthew, it's $14.5 million. I know, but I can't do this anymore. What do you want to do instead? And that's when Matthew said the words that would either save his career or end it. I don't know yet, but I'll know it when I see it. Until then, I'm not doing anything. His agent thought he was insane. His manager thought he was throwing away his career. His friends thought he was having a midlife crisis. But Matthew had finally found something he'd lost years ago. The willingness to risk everything for the chance to become who he was meant to be. The easy money stopped. The offers dried up. And Matthew McConaughey, at the peak of his fame and fortune, walked into the wilderness with no map and no guarantee he'd ever find his way back. The walkaway and the wilderness. The first few months felt like freedom. Matthew had spent 15 years sprinting from one rom-com set to another, and suddenly his calendar was empty. He surfed every morning. He played with his dogs. He worked on his house. He read scripts. Real scripts. The kind he'd been too busy to consider before. But freedom has a way of turning into fear. 6 months passed. No serious offers came. His agent would call occasionally with another romantic comedy, another $8 million paycheck, and Matthew would say no. The agent would sigh. Just let me know when you're ready to work again. A year passed. Matthew started second-guessing everything. Maybe Hollywood was right. Maybe he was just a rom-com guy. Maybe he'd thrown away a golden career chasing a fantasy. He'd watch the Oscars and see actors thanking directors for taking chances on them, and he'd wonder if anyone would ever take a chance on him. The worst part wasn't the doubt. It was the silence. Hollywood moves fast, and when you step out of the current, it moves on without you. Directors stopped thinking of him. Casting directors stopped calling. The town that had once thrown millions at him now barely remembered his name. Then came a complication that made everything harder. Matthew's girlfriend, Camilla Alves, told him she was pregnant. They'd met in 2006 at a Los Angeles club. Camilla was a Brazilian model and designer, smart and grounded in a way Hollywood rarely was. They'd fallen in love slowly, carefully. She understood what Matthew was trying to do with his career. But now there was a baby coming. And babies need stability, health insurance, college funds, a father who works. Matthew was 38 years old, unemployed by choice, watching his savings account shrink while his girlfriend grew more pregnant every day. Friends would ask, "So what are you working on?" And he'd have to say, "Nothing right now." The pity in their eyes was worse than judgment. His mother, Kay, called from Texas. She didn't sugarcoat it. "You have a baby coming and no job. What's your plan?" "I'm waiting for the right thing." "Well, it better show up soon." Levi, his first son, was born in July 2008. Matthew held his boy in the Malibu hospital and felt the weight of fatherhood collide with the weight of unemployment. For the first time since he'd walked away from rom-coms, he seriously considered calling his agent and saying, "I'm ready. Send me whatever you've got." But something in him still refused to quit. 20 months. That's how long Matthew went without a single acting job. Almost 2 years of silence, while Hollywood forgot about him. Almost 2 years of wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his career. Almost 2 years of watching other actors work, while he waited for a phone call that might never come. He did odd things to stay sane. He taught film classes at the University of Texas. He worked on a ranch in South Texas, fixing fences and feeding cattle. He tried to write. He meditated. He went to therapy and confronted the question he'd been avoiding. Who am I when I'm not acting? The answer terrified him because he didn't know. Camilla held the family together. She launched a lifestyle brand. She kept their home stable while Matthew wrestled with his identity. She believed in what he was doing even when he stopped believing in himself. "You'll know it when it comes," she'd tell him. "And when it comes, you'll be ready." But doubt is a patient predator. It waited until 3 a.m. when Matthew couldn't sleep. It whispered in his ear at the grocery store when someone recognized him and said, "Hey, I loved you in Failure to Launch. When's your next movie?" It sat across from him at the dinner table when he looked at his son and wondered if he was failing him. Then, in 2010, the phone finally rang. It was his agent. "I've got something. It's not a rom-com, but it's not a huge paycheck either." Dieters? The script was for The Lincoln Lawyer, a legal thriller based on Michael Connelly's novel. The character was Mickey Haller, a defense attorney who works out of his Lincoln Town car, defending criminals in Los Angeles. He's charming but complicated, flawed but brilliant. Nothing like the characters Matthew had played before. The paycheck was small compared to his rom-com days, but Matthew didn't care about the money anymore. He cared about the door. He read the script twice, then he called his agent back. "I'm in. You sure? It's a lot less than you used to make." "I'm sure." Filming The Lincoln Lawyer felt like waking up from a coma. Matthew attacked the role with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. He studied real defense attorneys. He spent time in courtrooms. He built Mickey Haller from the ground up, finding the layers beneath the charm. For the first time in over a decade, he wasn't playing a version of himself. He was acting. The movie came out in March 2011. Critics noticed immediately. McConaughey reminds us he can actually act. wrote one reviewer. "Where has this guy been?" asked another. It made $85 million worldwide and proved something Matthew had been trying to tell Hollywood for years. He was more than the shirtless guy in the rom-com. But the real breakthrough was still coming. Director Jeff Nichols cast him in Mud, an indie film about a fugitive hiding on an island in Arkansas. The character was raw, dangerous, vulnerable. Nothing Hollywood expected from Matthew McConaughey. He shot the film for almost nothing, living in Arkansas, sinking into the role. When Mud premiered at Cannes in 2012, critics went wild. McConaughey delivers a career-best performance, the reviews declared. Suddenly, the industry was paying attention again. But this time, they weren't seeing a rom-com star trying to be serious. They were seeing a serious actor they'd criminally underestimated. Then came the offer that completed the transformation. The McConaissance and Oscar glory director Jean-Marc Vallée was making a film about Ron Woodroof, a Texas electrician diagnosed with AIDS in 1985 who smuggled unapproved medications into the United States to help himself and other patients survive. It was called Dallas Buyers Club. The role required the actor to lose nearly 50 pounds. The budget was tiny, around $5 million total. The shoot would be grueling, and there was almost no chance it would make money. Matthew read the script and knew instantly, this was it. This was the role worth waiting for. He called Vallée and said yes before discussing money. The paycheck was $200,000, a fraction of what he'd once commanded. But Matthew didn't care. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about proving something to himself and to everyone who'd written him off. Then came the transformation. To play Ron Woodroof, Matthew had to lose 47 pounds. He stopped eating solid food. He lived on vegetables, fish, tapioca pudding, and as little as possible. He lost the muscle he'd built over years of shirtless rom-com scenes. His face hollowed out. His body became skeletal. Friends were alarmed. Camilla worried. But Matthew was methodical, working with doctors to ensure he didn't damage himself permanently. He didn't just lose weight. He inhabited Ron Woodroof completely. The Texas accent came naturally, but the bravado, the rage, the desperation, those required something deeper. Matthew studied footage of AIDS patients from the 1980s. He read Ron's journals. He spent time with people who'd survived the epidemic. He wasn't performing Ron Woodroof. He was becoming him. Filming was intense. Low budget meant long days and minimal takes. Matthew gave everything to every scene, drawing from the anger he'd felt during his wilderness years, the desperation of wondering if his gamble would ever pay off. Ron Woodroof's fight to survive mirrored Matthew's fight to resurrect his career. When Dallas Buyers Club premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2013, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Standing ovations, critics calling it a revelation, industry insiders realizing they'd been dead wrong about Matthew McConaughey for 15 years. But the McConaissance, as critics dubbed it, wasn't just one film. It was an avalanche. In 2013 alone, Matthew appeared in Mud, Dallas Buyers Club, and The Wolf of Wall Street. 3 wildly different performances, 3 undeniable proofs that he was one of the best actors of his generation. Then came True Detective in 2014, an HBO series where he played Rust Cole, a haunted detective delivering philosophical monologues about time, consciousness, and human darkness. The show became a cultural phenomenon. Matthew's performance was hypnotic, terrifying, brilliant. Hollywood didn't just notice. Hollywood apologized. Directors who'd passed on him for years suddenly wanted meetings. Scripts for complex, challenging roles flooded his agent's office. Matthew McConaughey wasn't a comeback story. He was a complete reinvention, proof that an actor could rewrite his entire narrative if he was willing to risk everything. Then came Oscar Night 2014. Matthew was nominated for Best Actor for Dallas Buyers Club, up against Christian Bale, Bruce Dern, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Chiwetel Ejiofor. Most predictions had him winning, but Matthew tried not to think about it. He'd already won something more valuable: respect, the ability to choose his roles, the career he'd dreamed of during those 20 months in the wilderness. When Cate Blanchett opened the envelope and said his name, Matthew walked to the stage in a white dinner jacket, hugged Jared Leto, who'd won Best Supporting Actor for the same film, and stood at the podium where he'd imagined himself standing 1,000 times. His acceptance speech became instantly iconic. He didn't thank the usual list of producers and agents. Instead, he talked about 3 things he needed every day: something to look up to, God; something to look forward to, family; and someone to chase, his future self, in 10 years. "He's my hero," Matthew said about his future self. "I'll never be him, but I'm going to keep chasing him." It was pure Matthew, philosophical, Texan, genuine. The speech went viral, analyzed, and quoted for years. But for Matthew, the Oscar wasn't the end point. It was confirmation that the risk had been worth it. After the win, he could have coasted. He could have cashed in with big-budget blockbusters. Instead, he stayed selective. Interstellar, with Christopher Nolan, playing an astronaut in a cerebral sci-fi epic. Free State of Jones, a Civil War film about a farmer who rebels against the Confederacy. Gold, where he gained weight and went bald to play a desperate prospector. Some worked, some didn't, but every choice was intentional. Every role was something he wanted to do, not something he had to do. He married Camilla in 2012 in an intimate ceremony in Texas. They had 3 children: Levi, Vida, and Livingston. He wrote a memoir called Green Lights in 2020, which became a massive bestseller. The book laid out his philosophy. Life gives you red lights, stop, yellow lights, slow down, and green lights, go. But sometimes you have to turn red lights and yellow lights into green lights by changing your perspective. The philosophy was pure McConaughey. Texan optimism mixed with hard-earned wisdom. But it wasn't empty self-help. It was based on lived experience. The experience of walking away from $14.5 million. The experience of 20 months unemployed with a baby on the way. The experience of losing 47 pounds to play a dying man. The experience of winning an Oscar that almost never happened. Matthew's transformation from rom-com punchline to Oscar winner didn't happen by accident. It happened because he made the hardest choice an actor can make. He chose artistic integrity over financial security. He chose the long game over the quick paycheck. He chose who he wanted to be over who Hollywood wanted him to be. And in doing so, he didn't just save his career. He redefined what a Hollywood comeback could look like. Today, at 55 years old, Matthew McConaughey lives a life that perfectly reflects the philosophy he spent decades building. He splits time between his Austin, Texas home and a ranch outside the city, raising his 3 children far from the Hollywood machinery that once tried to define him. He's not retired, he's not slowing down, but he's living on his own terms in a way that would have been impossible during his rom-com years. His mornings start early, usually before sunrise. He works out, not to maintain a movie star body, but to clear his mind. He journals religiously, a habit he's kept since college. He writes down thoughts, observations, moments that feel significant. That practice became the foundation for Green Lights, his 2020 memoir that debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for weeks. The book wasn't a typical celebrity memoir filled with gossip and name-dropping. Instead, Matthew organized his life around a simple philosophy. Green light moments are when life says go, when opportunities align and success flows naturally. Red lights are stops, obstacles, rejections. Yellow lights are warnings to slow down and reconsider. But here's the key insight Matthew discovered. You can often turn red and yellow lights into green lights by changing your perspective, your effort, or your approach. It's Texas wisdom dressed up as philosophy, practical, optimistic, grounded in lived experience rather than abstract theory. The book resonated because Matthew had earned the right to give advice. He'd turned the reddest light of his career, being typecast and dismissed, into the greenest light, an Oscar and artistic freedom. The success of Green Lights surprised even him. It sold millions of copies worldwide. He recorded the audiobook himself, his voice turning pages into conversations. He went on a book tour, appearing not just at bookstores but at churches, community centers, and universities. He wanted to talk to regular people, not just fans. He wanted conversations, not speeches. But Matthew's philosophy isn't just talk. In 2008, during his wilderness years when he had no acting work, he co-founded the Just Keep Livin' Foundation with Camilla. The organization provides fitness and wellness programs to underserved high schools, teaching teenagers that physical health connects to mental clarity and life success. The name came from a line his character Wooderson said in Dazed and Confused. "You just gotta keep livin', man." Livin. The foundation now operates in over a dozen schools across the country, and Matthew stays personally involved. He shows up at programs, talks to kids, runs fitness sessions. He's not interested in just writing checks. He wants to be present, to show teenagers that someone believes in them enough to show up. At home in Austin, Matthew is relentlessly present with his family. Camila, whom he married in 2012, is his anchor. She's built her own successful career as a designer and lifestyle entrepreneur, co-hosting Mila and Me on YouTube and launching handbag and cooking lines. But more importantly, she keeps Matthew grounded. In interviews, he talks about her with genuine reverence, not the performative praise celebrities often give their spouses. "She makes me better," he says simply. "She sees through my bullshit and loves me anyway." There are 3 children: Levi, born in 2008, Vida, born in 2010, and Livingston, born in 2012, are being raised deliberately un-Hollywood. No private jets, no red carpets unless absolutely necessary, no entitlement. Matthew and Camilla enforce rules, chores, manners, gratitude. The kids attend regular schools in Austin. They play sports. They don't have social media. They know their dad is famous, but fame isn't celebrated in their house. Hard work is, kindness is, showing up is. Matthew has said that his biggest fear as a parent is raising kids who feel entitled because of his success. So he makes them work for things. He makes them earn allowance. He tells them no. It's pure McConaughey parenting, passed down through generations. "My mom didn't let me get soft," Matthew says. "I'm not letting my kids get soft either." His relationship with Texas has only deepened over the years. While most A-list actors cluster in Los Angeles or New York, Matthew chose to stay in Austin, the city where his career began. He's a regular at University of Texas football games. He teaches occasional film classes at UT as a professor of practice. He's involved in local businesses and charities. He's not just living in Texas, He's invested in Texas, which brings up the question everyone keeps asking. Will Matthew McConaughey run for governor? He's flirted with the idea publicly. In 2021, polls showed he'd be competitive against incumbent Governor Greg Abbott. He spent months seriously considering it, meeting with political advisors, studying policy, thinking about what he could actually accomplish in office. Texas loves him. He's authentic, charismatic, and genuinely connected to the state in a way most politicians aren't. But in November 2021, Matthew announced he wouldn't run. Not because he was afraid of losing, but because he wasn't sure politics was the best way to serve. "I'm going to keep working for the people in ways that I am," he said. "I'm not going to put a label on it, but I'm going to keep showing up." It was a very Matthew answer. No label, no box, just showing up and doing the work. Since then, he's continued teaching at UT, expanded his foundation, and remained selective about acting roles. He's not churning out 3 movies a year. He waits for projects that excite him. Sing and Sing 2, where he voices a koala. Let him make something his kids can actually watch. The Gentleman series for Netflix brought him back to television. But he's not chasing anything. He's choosing. At 55, Matthew has something rare in Hollywood. Contentment. Not complacency, but genuine satisfaction with who he is and what he's built. He's not trying to prove anything anymore. He's not competing with younger actors. He's not worried about his legacy. He's living his life, raising his family, and working on projects that matter to him. His impact on Hollywood extends beyond his own career. The McConaissance proved that actors aren't stuck in boxes unless they accept those boxes. It showed that reinvention is possible at any age if you're willing to sacrifice security for authenticity. Young actors now study his career as a roadmap. Don't let early success define you. Be willing to walk away from easy money. Trust your instincts even when everyone thinks you're crazy. Matthew's story resonates because it's fundamentally American. It's about second chances. It's about betting on yourself when everyone else has written you off. It's about refusing to be defined by other people's expectations. From Uvalde to Austin to Hollywood and back to Austin, he's lived according to his own compass. He's not perfect. He's made bad movies even after the McConaissance. His political views are hard to pin down, which frustrates people who want him to pick a side. His laid-back philosophy can sometimes seem simplistic to critics who think life requires more complexity than just keep living. But those criticisms miss the point. Matthew McConaughey's legacy isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic. It's about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. It's about walking away from $14.5 million because it represented a life you didn't want to live. It's about loving your family more than your fame. It's about turning red lights into green lights by refusing to accept other people's limitations. So what's the lesson from Matthew's journey? Maybe it's that you're never too successful to start over, never too comfortable to take a risk, never too defined by your past to reimagine your future. Maybe it's that the best version of yourself is always 10 years ahead, and the goal isn't to catch him, but to keep chasing him. Maybe it's that saying no to the wrong things is how you make space for the right things to find you. Or maybe, in the most Texan way possible, it's simply this: just keep living, man. Livin. If Matthew's story inspired you, if you've ever felt trapped by success or tempted to walk away from the safe choice, leave a comment below. Tell us about a time you chose authenticity over security. Tell us about your own red lights and green lights. Hit subscribe for more stories about people who rewrote their own narratives. Because in the end, Matthew McConaughey's greatest role wasn't Ron Woodroof or Rust Cole. It was himself, the guy from Uvalde who refused to be anything other than exactly who he was meant to be. All right, all right, all right. That's the story.